The hush that falls is not a blanket of peace, but a drawn breath held too long. Sunset here is not a curtain closing on labour, but a signal for a different, more watchful kind of work to begin. In the frozen cathedral-like forests and the deep, locked river valleys, winter camps exist in a state of suspended animation. The silence they cultivate is not quietude, but a tense, listening stillness. The night unfurls itself, a vast black fabric, and survival hinges on things as delicate as a canvas wall, a heap of glowing coals, and the grim, wordless patience of men waiting for a reprieve they cannot hasten. Before we venture deeper into this slow, cold grasp, a simple request, a tap, a subscription to epic, boring history, ensures you journey with us again into these hushed corridors of the past. Leave a word in the comments, your location, your hour, whether you're winding down or just beginning. Now, lean back. Let the light in your room grow dim, if you're able. Allow some steady mechanical sound, a fan's whir, a furnace's sigh to form a backdrop. Let us begin our passage into that old pervasive cold. The light does not fade so much as it is a asterisk withdrawn asterisk, siphoned from the world by the deepening grey of the sky. You've been moving with a purpose that admits no haste for the last hour, because haste means sweat, and sweat is a liquid promise of deeper cold to come. The woodpile beside the lean-to is a testament to both effort and impending insufficiency. You had another armful anyway, a gesture of defiance against the coming accounting. Others are spectres in the gloaming, performing the same final rites. They check the guy lines, their fingers clumsy in mittens. They slap the canvas to shed its accumulating white burden. Speeches are nearly forgotten art here. Words are units of energy, and energy is the one commodity never wasted. Your gaze sweeps the tree line, a ritual, not an inspection. The pines and firs are becoming silhouettes, absorbing into the gathering murk. The forest itself seems to be receding, pulling its essence back into the earth for safekeeping. You note how the ice-laden branches bow, how the shadows between trunks congeal into something solid and dark. You've developed an internal barometer for this dying light. A certain steel-blue quality in the clouds tells you there are 40 minutes left. A shift to a deeper, woolen grey means 20. This wisdom lives in your marrow, a knowledge paid for in shivers. The shelter's interior is already a capsule of condensed existence. The air is peat-thick with wood smoke and the exhalations of damp wool and unwashed men. The fire pit is a crude, hungry eye in the floor's centre, its ring of stones forever stained the colour of old charcoal. They are not meant to be beautiful. They are meant to contain, and containment leaves its brutal mark. In the deepest cold of the night, one might split with a sound like a bone snapping, a mute reminder of entropy's constant work. You settle onto your bed of boughs. They were once a fragrant, yielding mattress. Now they are a skeletal lattice offering no more comfort than the frozen ground beneath. The cold seeps up immediately, a deep, aching pressure that maps the points of your contact with the earth. Adjusting your position is a temporary truce, soon broken. The fire mutters to itself, a dry, consuming whisper. You know its metabolism intimately. You can calculate the intervals at which it will need feeding, the number of times the shelter's skin will be breached, letting in a gush of air so cold it feels solid. You've learned to clench your entire body a heartbeat before the flap opens, a futile physiological fortification. Your fingers, even nestled in the pit of your stomach, hold a dull, toothache-like throb. It starts in the tiny joints, a stiffness that feels geological. By dawn they will be foreign objects, clumsy and distant. You will perform small, ritualistic motions over them, blowing warm air, tucking them, chafing them, a liturgy of minor hope. The others arrange themselves around the pulsating heart of the fire in a silent cartography of tenure and toughness. Your place is ordained, a middling territory. The man whose knees nearly touched the stones earned that spot the winter you were still in Montreal. The greenest among you takes the post by the entrance, where the cold pools like water. He assumes it without comment. it is the order of things. True darkness descends, and the visible world is erased. Sound becomes the only geography. The forest talks in its sleep. Trees pop, ice shears, snow slides from a branch. Farther off, the river groans as its frozen carapace adjusts, a deep tectonic complaint. These are the ordinary nocturnes. It is the asterisk silence asterisk that follows them, the sudden void that makes the hair on your neck prickle. The quiet between sounds is an immense attentive ear. The man beside you coughs, a liquid rattling exhalation. It is yesterday's cough, grown deeper. In the firelight his eyes have a glassy, febrile shine. Sickness here is a binary state. You work through it, or it works through you. There is no third option, no gentle convalescence. The fire sinks into itself. A shadow peels from the wall of men, steps forward, and lays 2 logs across the embers. It is an act loaded with consequence, immediate warmth traded against the store of tomorrow's pre-dawn hours. The deliberation feels profound each time. You close your eyes to grant them relief, but the private dark only amplifies your awareness of discomfort. The cold becomes articulate, describing every damp patch on your long johns, every knot in your neck. You open them again. Sleep will not be entered, it will be fallen into, a momentary lapse in your guard duty. Conversation, when it sparks, is purely transactional. Remarks about the next day's trapline, observations about the wind. No one gives voice to the thoughts that swell in the quiet. The mental tally of remaining food, the fear of a boot finally giving out, the private wonder if you can endure another month of this. To speak these things would be to make them real, to give them power. Someone ventures that the clouds might not carry snow tomorrow. A grunt of agreement answers. The silence reclaims its territory, heavier than before. You hitch your blanket higher, symbolic gesture against the laws of thermodynamics. The wool is threadbare, a constellation of holes your fingertips know by heart. It is asterisk yours asterisk. And in this place, that possession is a profound truth. Nothing dries. Everything exists in a liminal state between frozen and damp, a slow, perpetual cycle of partial thaw and refreeze. Hunger is a tenant that has taken up permanent residence in your belly. The evening's broth was a ghost of nourishment, salt and gristle in tepid water. You consumed it with monastic slowness, extracting every possible calorie. The concept of satiety belongs to another life. Here, you seek only the postponement of gnawing emptiness. The wind discovers a new voice outside, testing the shelter's seams. Fingers of cold air slip through every imperfect join, every threadbare patch. You make yourself small, folding your hands into your armpits, becoming a compact ball of conserved heat. Motion is a luxury, a spendthrift act. Time loses its meaning in the deep well of the night. Minutes can stretch into epochs. Hours can collapse into the space between 2 heartbeats. You measure progress by the recession of the flames, by the cycle of coughs and shuffles around you. The clock's hour is irrelevant. The night will expire when it chooses. A pocket of sap explodes in the fire, sending a shower of orange sparks spiraling upward to die against the dark canvas ceiling. The roof is already peppered with such tiny blackened constellations. You imagine, for a terrifying flash, the canvas catching, the sudden blinding panic, the frantic scramble into the killing cold. You bury the thought. It is an indulgence you cannot permit. Fear must be distilled. Only the useful residue of caution is kept. Your leg muscles begin to cramp, protesting the cold and immobility. You flex your feet inside the rigid caves of your boots. By morning the leather will be a frozen shell, and you will have to winch your feet back into them. It is a minor, daily battle in a war of attrition. The man opposite has his eyes shut, but the muscle in his jaw jumps and tightens. No one here achieves true sleep. What passes for it is a shallow, troubled drifting, a state where you remain aware of the cold's weight on your chest. The wind veers, its direction indecisive. This restless quality often heralds a storm. You listen, trying to decipher its intent. but it is just another vast, indifferent force. The fire is sinking again. A collective inertia holds the men for a moment, each hoping another will move first. The cold deepens palpably during this hesitation, a stark lesson in the fragility of comfort. It falls to you. You rise, a symphony of pops and aches. You choose 2 splits from the pile, place them with care on the guttering coals. The flame hesitates, then licks upward. You return to your spot, which has already grown cold and alien in your brief absence. No acknowledgement is given. It is the rotation, the machinery of the night. The movement has agitated fresh aches into life. You try to settle back into the impression your body had made, but it is gone. You must begin the slow work of warming the earth beneath you all over again. The night continues its imperceptible, inevitable crawl. You hover in the grey limbo between consciousness and dream. When your eyes open once more, nothing has altered. The same fire, the same hunched forms, the same immense pressing cold. You have no memory of slipping away. Time has become unmoored. The promise of morning is a bittersweet consolation. It means an end to this vigil, but it also heralds another day of labour in the unrelenting cold. You have long since ceased marking days on a calendar. There is only this night, and then the next, linked in a seemingly endless chain until something, a thaw, a departure, a disaster, breaks the sequence. You close your eyes once more, not expecting rest, but because hope is the one thing not rationed here. A fresh draught, needle sharp, finds a new weakness in the canvas. You pull the ragged wool over your mouth and endure. Your patience is not a virtue. It is the bedrock fact of your existence. There is no alternative.
Imagine the dread that settled when twilight brought not repose, but a tightening in the chest. Picture sunset, not as a release from toil, but as the lowering of a gate behind which lurked the long, watchful hours. This was the truth of the early frontier winter. In the vast, frozen woodlands and along ice-locked rivers, small pockets of human persistence clung to existence. These camps did not fall quiet so much as they became hollow, filled with a listening silence. The dark was not empty, it was occupied territory. Survival hung on the integrity of cloth walls, the stubbornness of embers, and the frayed nerves of men counting the minutes until first light. Before we venture into that cold and consider those lonely vigils, a request. The notion of exploring history's hushed, nocturnal corners appeals to you. Consider showing your support. I tap on the like button, a subscription to Epic. Boring history, it signals you wish to join these journeys. Tell us where you are listening from, what the hour is on your clock, whether you're winding down or gearing up. Now, find a comfortable position, lower the lights, allow the ambient noise of your own world, a distant hum, a faint rustle, to become the background. Let us begin our passage into that other, harder night. The daylight does not so much fade as it is withdrawn. Pried from the sky earlier than memory or hope allows. You have spent the last hour in a steady, urgent scramble for fuel. Movement is brisk, but measured haste is a luxury that leads to dampness beneath layers. And dampness is a slow, deep poison in this cold. The wood pile beside your eager shelter looks sufficient, but you know this is an illusion. It is a trick of the fading light. You add another bundle regardless, understanding that by the time the world is gray again, the pile will have shrunk to a pathetic cluster of sticks. Others move like shadows in the gloaming, performing the same sacraments of preparation. Fingers test the tension of ropes, brush snow from sagging canvas, secure the fragile envelope that separates you from the void. Speech is sparse in this liminal hour. It is not a sullen silence, but an economical one. Conversation burns calories better spent on shivering or on the simple act of staying awake. Your eyes sweep the tree line, a ritual performed without expectation. The pines and spruces are dissolving into uniform blackness, their individual forms consumed by the gathering gloom. The forest is not a collection of trees tonight, but a single, solid wall of darkness, advancing. Do you note how the ice-weighted branches bow, how every crevice between trunks is now a well of ink? You have become a scholar of winter's twilight. There is a specific density to the air, a tangible thickening of shadow that tells you precisely how many minutes of usable light remain. Today, that signal came too soon, hastened by a bank of low, woolen clouds that have smothered the sky since midday. This knowledge is not intellectual, it is cellular, written into your muscles by repeated exposure. The heavens are a sundial you consult with your skin, measuring time in units of chill and diminishing visibility. Inside, the shelter is a capsule of FUG, or hangs heavy with the smells of wood smoke, wet dog though there is no dog, and the pervasive, sweet minus rot scent of unwashed bodies and mildew. The fire pit is the sky and the earth's floor, ringed by stones grown fat with soot. Someone has arranged Sodden's oxen mittens on a makeshift line, and the steam they emit carries the bitter perfume of lanolin and old sweat. It is not a good smell, but it is your smell, the scent of shared fate. The stones are veterans, their surfaces a glossy black, etched with a labyrinth of fine cracks from their endless cycle of expansion and contraction. Each fissure is a tiny betrayal, a proof that nothing here is permanent, not even rock. You lower yourself onto your clean patch of floor. Beneath a meager mat of long minus dead pine boughs and a blanket more akin to a fishing net, the ground is iron. The cold does not creep, it assaults, a solid, aching presence against hip bone, shoulder blade, thigh. You squirm, a futile dance against the inevitable numbness. The boughs beneath you were once a bed of emerald, springy and fragrant. Now they are a brittle, brown crust, offering as much cushion as a layer of discarded nutshells. You recall with a clarity that surprises you the first night here, how those same boughs felt like opulence. How the new minus dark smell of the shelter promised adventure. That illusion lasted precisely as long as it took for the deep minus night cold to find every gap, every flaw. The fire speaks in whispers and snaps. It is a sound you have learned to distrust, for its peaks of consumption, of something precious being steadily devoured. Time is no longer measured by a clock's hands, but by the life of the flame. You have internalized its metabolism. The height of the yellow tongues, the glow of the heart minus skulls, the rate at which a log is reduced to ash, these are your hours and minutes. The night will demand intervention, perhaps for times. Each intervention is a small crisis, the shock of rising, the blast of frozen air as the flap is lifted, the painful negotiation of stiff limbs. You have learned to clench your jaw, to steel your core, as if will alone could form a shield against the cold's ingress. The calculus of combustion is now instinctual. You can heft a piece of wood and know its story, whether it will blaze bright and fast like a liar's promise, or burn slow and true, offering a steadfast amber warmth. Your fingers, even tucked close, have taken on a life of their own. They ache with a dull, profound throb, like teeth that have been struck, not a sharp pain, but a deep bony discontent. You open and close them slowly, observing the motion as you might watch a strange, clumsy animal. By dawn, they will be alien things, claws of ice and sinew, and you will spend the precious first hour of light trying to bargain feeling back into them. The stiffness is a creeping vine. It starts in the very tips, in the small, complex joints that allow you to grasp a knife or tie a knot. It winds its way back, claiming wrists, elbows, until your entire arm feels like a poorly oiled piece of machinery. You have tried everything: friction, breath, the pitiful warmth of your own armpits. Each act grants a fleeting, miserly reprieve. The others are performing the same grim geometry around the fire circle. Each man stakes a claim to a few square feet of frozen earth. There is a tacit ledger governing these positions, based on tenure, on resilience, on the silent currency of perceived toughness. You occupy middle ground, close enough for the fire to paint your face in shifting orange light, far enough that your spine remains a frozen ridge, untouched by the heat. It is always the back that remembers the cold longest. The man to your left predates you by a fortnight. This ancient history earns him 6 inches of superior positioning. He does not boast of it, you do not contest it. The order of things is one of the few stable structures left. The newest man, a boy really, holds the post by the entrance, where the wind finds its way in with gleeful persistence. He accepted this without a word, his eyes already old with the understanding that ease is not a right, but a dividend paid in sweat and time. Now, true darkness wins. The world beyond the taut canvas ceases to be. It is replaced by sound. The forest talks in its sleep. Trees, gripped by the cold, let out sharp, wooden cracks like farm miners off rifle shots. Out on the river, the ice sheet groans a deep, visceral sound of pressure and resistance. These are the known noises, the white noise of winter. You have trained yourself to hear through them. It is the gaps that hold your attention, the moments of absolute stillness between the groans and cracks, when the silence itself seems to listen back. The river is a presence to the east, unseen but felt. Its voice is different from the trees, a bass note resonating through the frozen earth. In daylight, you've seen its frozen sky in a plain of white, buckling and dredged where the water beneath still struggles. The ice is a map of danger, with dark, liquid veins showing through in places, a script of warning everyone learns to decipher. A cough rips through the close air, wet rattling familiar. It is the same cough from yesterday, and the day before that. It has worsened, but not yet crossed the invisible threshold into crisis. To raise us would demand action, and there is no action to take. There are no tonics, no steaming baths, no real medicines. Only waiting, and the thin hope that a body's own defenses will hold until the thaw. The cougher is young, or was young once. The earthened, grime obscure has aged. His eyes have that peculiar, glassy shine that sometimes walks ahead of a fever, yet he still rises for his turn at the woodpile, still performs his duties. Here, sickness has only two categories: what you can walk through and what you cannot. There is no middle ground of convalescence, no gentle recovery. You either endure, or you end. The fire's light wanes, dimming by a perceptible degree. Someone stirs, a dark shape against the gloom, breath plumbing in the firelight like a ghost. He adds not one, but two chunks of wood to the coals. An act of generosity, or perhaps of fear. Fuel now means less later, a debt against tomorrow's comfort. But later is an abstraction. Now is the only reality that carries weight. You have made this same desperate bargain on other nights, trading future security for present solace. The decision always feels profound in the moment, a moral choice, though its impact on the grand ledger is negligible. The wood supply is a constant, low minus grade worry. There are still trees to be had, branches to be harvested within a punishing day's work. The effort is colossal, but it remains within the realm of possibility. For now, you let your eyelids fall, not for sleep, but to grant your sight a rest from the hypnotic, dying fire. The darkness behind your eyes amplifies every other sense. The damp chill of your woolens, the stiff cord of your neck, the pervasive smell of smoke and mold all grow more vivid, more oppressive. You open them again. Sleep will take you eventually, not as a gentle guest, but as a thief who overpowers your exhaustion. Behind your closed lids, the after-image of the flamed answers, a phantom sun of orange and gold. These imagined flames are somehow warmer than the real ones. Your neck hosts a permanent, dull agony, a knot of tension that radiates from the base of your skull down between your shoulder blades. You cannot recall the last time your head found a posture that did not whisper of pain. Talk around the fire is scant, a bare exchange of necessities. A comment about the weather tomorrow, a guess about the snow, a mention of a trap that needs mending. No one voices the questions that hang in the smoky air, thicker than the smoke itself. How many more nights like this? How much colder can it get? Will the flower hold out? These questions have no answers that bring comfort, so they are swallowed, left to sour in the gut. Instead, someone observes that the clouds look less heavy, and another grunts in agreement. The silence returns, deeper for having been broken. Weather prophecy here is a blend of observation and desperate hope. You have all learned to read the language of the sky, the shape of clouds, the direction of the wind's bite, the behavior of the few hardy jays or ravens. But winter is a capricious god, mocking the predictions of mortals. Tomorrow's weather dictates tomorrow's labor, which in turn dictates the quality of tomorrow night's suffering. Every element is chained to the next in a long, unforgiving sequence of cause and effect. You hitch the blanket higher around your shoulders, a symbolic gesture. It offers little actual warmth, but the motion itself is a tiny act of defiance, a pretense of agency. Smoke, capricious, shifts and drifts into your face. You turn away, but your eyes sting in water regardless, adding their own salt moisture to the general dampness of your existence. The blanket in your hands is a sorry thing. Coarse, greasy wool, worn to a web in places. You know the locations of its holes by heart, can trace their geography with a numb fingertip. It was issued to you, one among many identical threadbare articles. Yet, you are fiercely possessive of it, in this place of shared everything. It is yours alone, a tiny kingdom of worn cloth. Nothing ever dries. Everything exists in a state of perpetual damp, in a slow, oscillating journey between wet and frozen, never arriving at either extreme long enough to matter. Your stomach clenches, a hollow fist. Hunger has become a constant companion, so familiar you often forget its name. The evening meal was a watery, leathery strips of dried meat and whatever fibrous. Bitter roots could be pried from the iron minus hard ground. Enough to blunt the sharpest edge of starvation, but not enough to ever feel fed. The meat must be chewed endlessly, a tasteless, salty pulp. The roots are worse, requiring prolonged boiling to become merely edible, not palatable. Someone somewhere claimed they held vitamins. You have seen no evidence of this, except that men who eat them do not immediately perish. Satisfaction is not an expectation here. Entrance is the only goal. One scant meal leading to the next. One endless night yielding, eventually to a gray, laborious dawn. Outside, the wind finds its voice. You hear it first in the high branches, a rushing sigh, before it fingers its way into the shelter's weaknesses. Cold air, sharper than any blade, leaks through every imperfect seam, every loose minus down, every threadbare patch in the canvas. You retreat into your coat, pulling your arms inside the shell, tucking your hands against the comparative warmth of your own ribs. It helps if you remain absolutely still. The coat is a carapace of stiff canvas, its original color lost beneath a geology of dirt, grease, and resin. Inside this portable cave, your hands find a faint echo of your body's furnace. You have learned to keep them there, prisoners of your own heat, releasing them only for the most critical tasks. Movement is expenditure. It means exposing flesh to the air, means losing the precious, trapped warmth. So you cultivate stillness. You become a statue, breathing shallowly, your world contracted to the circle of firelight. Time in this repetition becomes meaningless. You might have been sitting here for 20 minutes or for 2 hours. There is no internal clock left that you trust. Your sense of duration has been stretched and twisted by monotony and discomfort. What feels like an eternity might be a brief interval, a short doze might encompass half the night. The others mark the passage of time in their own somatic languages. I shifted out, a cleared throat, the soft thump of another log on the fire. These are the true ticks of the night's clock. The darkness will end when it chooses. Knowing the hour will not hasten its departure. The man beside you moves, adjusting his position. Where his body had been a slight buffer against the cold, a new draft now rushes in to fill the void. He is engaged in the same hopeless quest for comfort. You do not look at him. To meet his eyes would be to acknowledge the shared, degrading misery. Somehow, the physical closeness here creates a greater isolation. You are near enough to feel the heat radiating from another man, yet utterly alone inside your own skull. You know the sounds of the men around you, the rhythm of their breathing, the particular timbre of their snores better than you know a single one of their thoughts. By day, you are a crew, a unit of labor. By night, you are a collection of solitary sentinels, coincidentally sharing the same frozen foxhole. The fire pops, a sharp, angry sound. A constellation of sparks arcs upward toward the roof. You watch them rise, glow for a brilliant instant, and die, extinguished before they can kiss the canvas. It is a perfect, tiny metaphor for the fragility of it all. The fire, the shelter, your own will to persist, all are interdependent. A single failure in one link unravel the entire, precarious chain. The roof bears the pockmarks of previous such eruptions, small dark stars in the fabric. No one has patched them. The effort required is a currency spent elsewhere, on more immediate needs. Your mind, unbidened, conjures the image of the canvas catching, of the sudden inferno, the panic, the scramble into the naked, killing cold. The thought is ice in your veins. You banish it, focusing fiercely on the present, where the fire still burns within its stone ring, where no disaster is currently happening. You have heard the stories, of course, told in flat, uninflected voices over cook fires, tales of shelters collapsing under sudden, heavy snow, fires that guttered out in the deepest, blackest hour, of men who simply did not wake up. These narratives are delivered not as horror stories, but as technical briefings. Data points. The man who froze had removed his boots. Lesson: keep your boots on. The roof that fell had not been cleared of snow. Lesson: clear the snow. Fear is an inefficient emotion. Caution is a tool. You have learned to walk the narrow line between them. Your legs protest now, muscles cramping from cold and immobility. You flex your feet inside your stiff boots, feeling the protest in your ankles, the disturbing nothingness in your toes. Come morning, those boots will be frozen solid, miniature caves of ice, and you will have to fight them onto your feet. It is a minor indignity and a life composed of indignities. The boots are cracked leather, race-old with puckered patches of rawhide. They fit where they touch, to loosen some places, agonizingly tighten others. They're what you have. Inside them, your feet live in a permanent, damped dusk. The leather does not breathe, sweat cannot evaporate. You have made at bitter peace with the inevitability of blisters, of chilblains, praying only that they do not progress to the point of crippling you. Walking is not a luxury. It is the mechanism of survival. Across the fire, a man has his eyes closed, but you doubt he sleeps. His breathing is too shallow, too controlled. The line of his jaw is taut, muscles working even in pretended rest. No one here truly sleeps. The cold is an insomniac jailer, passes for sleep as a shallow, twitching semi-minus consciousness, where exhaustion battles discomfort to a temporary, uneasy truce. Real sleep requires a surrender the body will not allow here. You have dreamed in this place, fractured, senseless visions that splice memories of warmth and plenty with the gritty reality of your surroundings. You remembered hearth superimposed on this fire pit, a familiar voice drowned out by the wind. These dreams are always shattered by some physical revolt, a cramp, a piercing chill, the urgent pressure of a full bladder. They are less escapes than they are cruel parodies of escape. You strain your ears, trying to parse the wind's intent. Is it rising, gathering strength for an assault? Is it fading, losing interest? From inside this fabricant would mine a smoke filter, it is hard to tell. The wind is a master here. It dictates the fire's mood, finds new vulnerabilities in your defenses, sets the tone for the misery index of the coming hours. But it is beyond your control. So, listening becomes another form of prayer, or of pointless vigilance. You have learned that a north wind carries the deepest, most sincere cold. A west wind often brings snow in its baggage. This knowledge was not taught, it was a somos d through your skin, through repeated, painful exposure. Tonight, the wind seems indecisive, circling, coming from no fixed quarter. This unsettled behavior often heralds a storm. Whether the storm arrives this night or tomorrow or spares you entirely is a secret the wind keeps. Someone impatient or simply colder than the rest adds wood before the fire has properly asked for it. The flames leap, grateful, throwing a new, sharper set of shadows against the walls. The dancing shadows create a brief, beautiful illusion of life and movement. For a heartbeat, the shelter feels less like a desperate holding cell and more like a place where people might live. The illusion is thin and quickly torn. You watch the fresh bark curl and blacken, watch the first eager tongues of flame lick along the wood's grain. There is a primal, hypnotic solace in watching fire consume. It is a process so fundamental it requires no thought, only witness. You become aware suddenly of your own breathing, of how the cold air rasps slightly in your throat. You experiment, trying to breathe through the wool of your blanket, to warm the air before it hits your lungs. It feels suffocating, like trying to inhale through a wet sock. You stop. It is the accumulation that wears you down. No single discomfort is unbearable, but the chorus of them, the stiff fingers, the aching back, the chapped lips, the itchy scalp beneath your hat, a hollow stomach creates a weight that presses you into the ground. Your lips are split and dry at the corners. You have disciplined yourself not to lick them. It only makes the cracks burn and bleed anew. But the instinct persists, maddening. Your scalp itches fiercely. An infuriating sensation. You cannot properly scratch through layers of matted hair and wool cap. These tiny torments become obsessions in the long, empty hours. Thoughts circle like vultures because there is no other prey for the mind. You think of home, or what used to be home. But the memories are flat, two-dimensional, like illustrations in a book you read long ago. You can see the faces, but you cannot hear the laughter. You can recall events, but not the emotions that gave them color. This disconnect is more frightening than the cold when you dwell on it. So you do not dwell. You focus on the immediate, the tangible. The size of the fire, the remaining wood, the quality of the darkness, the slow, granular passage of time. The fire dims again. This time, a collective inertia holds everyone in place. Perhaps each man hopes the responsibility will fall to another. Perhaps each is just too weary to make the decision to move. The cold, sensing hesitation, presses its advantage. It creeps closer, a palpable force, a reminder that the warmth is leased, not owned, and the rent comes due regularly. You wait. You watch the flames shrink, retreating into their bed of coals. How long will this standoff last? It is a tiny, nightly rebellion against duty. It always breaks, because it must. Letting the fire die is not an option. It is a death sentence. The flames are ghosts now, mere red embers giving little light and less heat. The temperature drop is immediate. A slap in the face. The thin barrier between bearable and unbearable has been crossed. It falls to you. You rise, a slow, painful uncoiling. Joints protest. Muscles complain. You reach for the wood pile, your fingers selecting to pieces by feel alone medium-minus sized, dry solid. You place them with care on the glowing heart of the fire. For a moment, nothing. Then a wisp of smoke, a flicker, and the flames birth themselves anew, climbing the fuel. Warmth, that fickle friend, returns. The simple act of standing has left you subtly rearranged, more aware of your body's complaints. Your knees cracked like right wigs. Your back feels like a bad plank. The spot you vacated is already cold, the ground harder, the blanket thinner, as if your brief absence revoked all claims to comfort. No one offers thanks. It was your turn. The rotation is the law. Settling back, you cannot find the exact hollow your body had worn. You must begin the process of making it anew through pressuring time. The night grinds on, measured in these tiny, repetitive actions. The feeding of the fire, the slow numbing of flesh, the drift between a shallow wake of signals and a shallow nothingness. You open your eyes later, seconds, minutes, and nothing has changed. The fire still burns. The men are still shapes in the gloom. The cold still holds the shelter in its fist. You have no memory of closing your eyes, no sense of duration. Time has flowed around you indifferent. The fire looks slower. Someone else's turn will come soon. This is the rhythm, the metronome of the winter camp night. Not heroic, not eventful, just long. You endure them not through any vaulting courage, but through the utter absence of alternative. Morning always comes. It is the one reliable promise, and when it does, you will rise stiff, cold, soul-minus wearied. You will begin again the cycle of labor that earns you the right to another night of this waiting. The promise of dawn is both a solace and a threat. It means the night will end. It also means you must face another day of struggle in a cold that shows no sign of relenting. The cycle feels infinite until the day it isn't, until the ice breaks, or you leave, or something inside you simply snaps. You have given up counting days. Marking a calendar is an act of faith in a future you can no longer clearly envision. There is only now, and the vague, stretched minus out later of a winter that feels eternal. For this moment, there is only the fire, the darkness, the cold, and the hours that pass with the speed of continents drifting. You close your eyes once more, knowing true sleep is a myth here, but hoping for the counterfeit version anyway. Hope is a free currency here, and sometimes it pays a small dividend of oblivion. Outside, the wind pivots, fighting a new flaw in your armor. Fresh, keen draft discovers your neck. You hitch the blanket higher, tuck your chin to your chest, and settle into the only work that remains, the work of waiting. The darkness beyond your shelter is absolute, a black wool stuffed into the eyes of the world. No moon, no stars tonight. This profound dark makes your tiny heaven feel both achingly isolated and desperately necessary. A single, fragile bubble of almost minus warmth in a vast and hostile nothingness. You listen to the symphony of survival, the soughing breath of the men, the crackle minus snap of the fire, the endless monologue of the wind in the pines. It is a droning, repetitive music, and in its predictability lies a strange, cold comfort. A mind adrift touches on the tasks awaiting tomorrow. More wood, always more wood. Snow to shovel, gear to mend. The list is circular, endless. But there is a grim solace in routine, even a brutal one. The cough comes again, wetter, deeper. You send a silent, pointless wish into the dark that it does not worsen, that the spring arrives before the illness dips from chronic to critical. Wishes are thin gruel here. Hope is the last of your supplies. The fire needs attention again. You can see it in the languid droop of the flames. But the watch is not yours yet. So you wait, placing a fragile trust in the unspoken contract that someone else will stir when the need becomes dire. Around you, the others inhabit their own private planets of endurance, fighting battles that are intimately theirs, yet identical in form. You are together, yet profoundly separate, linked by circumstance, isolated by the solitary nature of suffering. Another span of time elapses something like an hour. The fire is fed. The cold does not abate. Nothing changes except that all of you are incrementally more tired, more worn down, more used. This is existence distilled to its bitter essence. Waiting for light, maintaining the flame, surviving. There is no glory in it, no narrative arc. Only the grinding, granular repetition of necessary acts. Your eyelids are weights again. This time, you do not resist. You let yourself be pulled down into whatever semblance of rest your body can muster, knowing the price will be paid in stiffness and chill upon waking. You accept the transaction. The fire paints the inside of your eyelids a pulsing red. The cold wraps around you like a second, heavier skin. The night stretches on, utterly indifferent to your discomfort, to your longing for it to be over. And still you endure, because entrance is the only task on the ledger. Tomorrow will arrive with its demands. Then you will meet them, because the alternative is unthinkable. For now, there is just this: the endless dark, the fragile shelter, the dying fire that must, against all odds, be kept alive. Pull your threadbare kingdom tighter around you. Shift your weight one final, futile time, and surrender to the waiting, which is the truest and hardest labor of winter. Jean-Baptiste Larocque, you made landfall at his first winter camp in November of 1793. He was 20-3, and the debts he carried in his ledger book were heavier than the pack on his back. He had put his mark on a contract with the Montreal Fur Company, lured by wages that seemed princely until he understood the currency in which they would be paid. The camp occupied a nameless river valley somewhere west of the great inland sea of Superior, a place absent from all maps. 6 souls were meant to winter there, trapping beaver and marten, waiting for the river's frozen skin to crack so their harvest of pelts could begin its journey to distant markets. Jean-Baptiste had pictured adventure, perhaps a rough road to modest fortune. What he found was a relentless, grinding sequence of cold dawns and colder nights, punctuated by labor that left his hands raw and his spirit frayed. The journey to the camp had been a 3-week education in diminishing returns. Each day's paddle against the current stripped away a layer of his romantic notions. He traveled with hardened men bound for other outposts, men who looked at him with the flat, assessing gaze of those who know the winter's tally is not always kind to newcomers. They offered no counsel unless it was begged for, and he learned swiftly that to beg was to show a fatal weakness. His first night, sleep was impossible. The cold was not an element, it was the very medium of existence, leaching up from the ground, pouring down from the black sky, pressing in from the walls of darkness itself. He lay awake, listening to the others breathe, wondering if they truly slept or were merely better actors. The fire burned low. No one moved to replenish it. So he did, hoping the gesture might buy a shred of acceptance. An older man named Meritiv Boygerish, who had spent 15 winters in such places, cracked an eye open and watched him. Said nothing, just watched, then closed his eye again. Jean-Baptiste knew he had erred, though the nature of the error was obscure. Perhaps he had used green wood, which smoked and spat and gave little heat. The others used only cured hardwood, carefully curated, but no one had told him. He learned it by silent observation, by the accumulation of small, unremarked minus upon failures. The shelter was a crude but functional thing, logs chinked with clan moss, roofed with bark and boughs. Inside, it was a space perhaps 15 by 12 feet, with a central fire pit and rough platforms along the walls for sleeping. The days assumed a pattern both monotonous and unpredictable. They rose in the frigid pre-minus dawn, checked their lines, skinned their catch, stretched the pelts, prepared meager food, gathered the eternal firewood, repaired gear, and waited for the darkness to return. Each man had a trap line, a circuit through the silent, snow-choked woods that consumed the daylight hours. Jean-Baptiste's line was the shortest, a concession to his greenness, but it still meant miles of trudging through deep snow, checking each steel-jawed sentinel, resetting those that had done their grim work. The waiting, once the day's labor was done, was the hardest discipline of all. In the long dark, there was nothing to do but endure the passage of time. The other men sometimes played at cards, wagering scraps of leather or promises of future tobacco. Jean-Baptiste watched but did not join, sensing the games had rules and histories he could not fathom. He had brought a book of verses from his mother. He tried to read by firelight, but the smoke stung his eyes and the cold made the pages crackle like old leaves. After a few attempts, he stored it away, wrapped in its protective oilcloth. Books belonged to another universe, one where light and leisure were assumed. By December, he had ceased thinking of home. Thought was a luxury, an expenditure of energy his body hoarded for pure survival. His mother's face began to blur at the edges, replaced in his mind's eye by more immediate concerns: the integrity of his boot seams, the keenness of his skinning blade, the location of the next trap. These practicalities consumed him. He moved through his tasks with a mechanical, thoughtless efficiency. Check the trap, remove the prize of any, reset the mechanism, move on. The traps themselves, cruel and simple, had lost their power to intimidate. Familiarity bred not contempt, but a cold indifference. The nights grew longer, or seemed to. He lost all track of calendar time, of days of the week. One of the men notched a stick to mark the passing days, but Jean-Baptiste never looked at it. Knowing the date changed nothing. The others wore their monotony like a second skin, their faces revealing nothing. A hierarchy existed, unspoken but absolute. My virtue of brutal experience was the final arbiter of all practical matters. The others deferred without discussion. In January, the cough that haunted the camp claimed a man in earnest. His name was Philippe Trudeau, 20-7 on his fourth winter. He had seemed robust, capable. Within 3 days, he was fevered, his skin burning to the touch, even as he shook with violent chills. They gave him the best place by the fire, extra blankets, sips of broth. They brewed tea as an S from spruce needles and willow bark. Remedies Marit recited without conviction. The steam rose, but Philippe could not hold the cup. There was nothing else to be done. The nearest settlement was weeks away through impassable snow. Moving him would have killed him faster. Jean-Baptiste took turns sitting with him through the worst of it, listening to the ragged, wet struggle of his breathing, feeding the fire when it waned. The sick man spoke in fragments, calling names of people not present, describing a home of impossible perfection, a hearth that never smoked, windows that admitted only light, children whose laughter was silent. On the fifth night, the rhythm of his breath changed. It grew slower, shallower, punctuated by pauses that stretched longer each time. Jean-Baptiste found himself leaning closer in the dark, counting the seconds between each ragged intake, waiting for the one that would not come. Just before the first gray smear of dawn, it stopped. The struggle simply left the man's face, replaced by an empty peace. The silence that followed was immense, wrong. Then someone coughed. Someone else turned on their platform. To life, such as it was, resumed. They wrapped him in a length of spare canvas and buried him in the snow, digging as deep as the frozen earth would allow. Merritt muttered a few words in French, something about gotten dressed, but the wind took them. The ground was stone below 2 feet. Their shovels rang against it. They covered him with stones and more snow, a cairn for the wolves to find come spring. Then they returned to the shelter and to their work. There was no ceremony, no day of mourning. Philippe's belongings were divided according to need. Jean-Baptiste received his spare blanket and felt no shame in taking it. That night, Jean-Baptiste lay awake again, not from cold but from a cold understanding. The man who died had been younger than Merritt, stronger than most, and yet he had simply stopped. He thought of the body under the snow, already beginning its return to the forest. The illness could have chosen any of them. It might still choose him. He examined his own body for signs, but found nothing definitive. Philippe had seemed fine until he wasn't. This thought, instead of terror, brought a peculiar calm. Fear presumed you could alter your fate. Jean-Baptiste no longer believed that. He could tend the fire, walk the line, gather wood, wait for morning. Beyond that, all was chance. This acceptance was a kind of liberation. If nothing he did mattered beyond the immediate task, the awful weight of the future dissolved. He existed only in the present, and the present demanded only that he continue. February brought a cold of a different character, deeper, more absolute, as if the very air had crystallized. The fire became a feeble protest, and they burned through their wood reserves at an alarming rate. The sky stayed achingly clear for weeks, which meant the nighttime cold deepened into something that could kill exposed flesh in minutes. Jean-Baptiste learned that clouds were a blanket, clear skies were an invitation to the deepest freeze. His fingers cracked and bled. He wrapped them in strips torn from a spare shirt, but the cloth soon stiffened with frozen blood and needed daily changing. He had lost feeling in the tips weeks before, which Merritt said was the beginning of the end for digits. Frostbite started with numbness, marched through blackening, ended in amputation or gangrene. His boots were disintegrating, seemed splitting, leather turned to board. He stuffed them with dry grass and moss, a pathetic insulation against the iron ground. Each morning he inspected his toes for the telltale waxy whiteness. So far luck held. But luck was not a strategy. The others were in similar states of decay. Clothes, a tapestry of patches. Equipment held together with improvisation and twine. Bodies growing lean despite careful rationing. The youngest, a boy called Thomas who couldn't be 18, developed a persistent tremor in his hands. He fumbled tools, spilled precious salt, but said nothing. No one complained. To complain was to imply an alternative existed. It did not. One night Merritt told a story. It was an event. They rarely spoke after dark, but perhaps the silence had grown too heavy even for him. The fire was coals painting their faces into hollow masks. Here its voice came from the shadows, quiet and clear. He spoke of his first winter, 30 years gone, when he was younger than Jean-Baptiste. He spoke of cold that stole breath, of watching men die, of learning that survival was 9 minus tenths patience and a sliver of blind luck. 3 men had died that first winter, he said. 1 to sickness, 1 to a misplaced axe blow, one who walked into the woods at dawn and never walked back out. You think you'll carry these nights with you forever, Merritt murmured, the words almost lost in the wind's sigh outside. You think the cold, the fear, will be etched into your bones. They won't. You forget the cold. You forget the fear. You remember only that you lived through it. And that becomes reason enough to do it again. Jean-Baptiste listened, understanding this was not comfort, but a transmission. This was the life a series of winters, endured and then folded away, each one a lesson for the next. The story did not warm him, but it placed his own suffering in a lineage. He was not the first, would not be the last. His ordeal was unremarkable, barely worth the telling. Arch arrived with no relenting. If anything, the cold seemed to gather its strength for a final vindictive stand. Supplies dwindled to a dangerous level. They had miscalculated, or been unlucky in the hunt. The remaining food would have to be stretched across an unknown number of days. The river ice became a constant, groaning interlocutor, its shifts and cracks echoing through the valley like the complaints of a giant. Jean-Baptiste had learned its language, the settling groan, the sharp crack of a new fault line, the meaningless pops and sighs. Sometimes the sounds were so violent he jolted awake, heart hammering, certain of catastrophe. But it was only the ice, engaged in its slow, tectonic argument with the season. He spent his nights now listening to that ice, to the wind, to the breathing of the men. These were the sounds of his world. Their absence would have been more terrifying in their presence. His body was a map of the winter. Hands scarred and thickened, face leather-red, eyes retreated into permanent shadows. His movements were slower, but wasted nothing. He had learned to conserve energy as a plant does, moving only when sunlight or necessity compelled it. Hatching his reflection in a pan of water one day, he did not recognize the gaunt, bearded stranger who looked back. By April, the snow began to retreat in patches, revealing the frozen, brown earth beneath. The sight should have sparked joy, sparked nothing. Not relief, not anticipation, just a dim acknowledgement of change. The first returning bird song, after months of silence, sounded shrill and alien. He had grown accustomed to the muffled quiet of deep winter. Spring's noises felt like an intrusion. He began the work of departure, sorting pelts, preparing the canoes that had wintered under a drift, calculating loads. The work was familiar, just another set of tasks. The pelts numbered in the hundreds. Beaver mostly, marten, fox, a few otter, each represented miles walked. Cold endured, a small death in the steel jaws. Each would be sold for a sum that Jean-Baptiste now knew could never equal the price paid. The last night felt no different. They ate their usual things too, spoke little. The food was fuel, nothing more. Jean-Baptiste looked at the shelter, the fire pit, the surrounding trees. He felt no nostalgia, no tenderness. This place had served a purpose. Now it would be abandoned, left to sag under future snows, its logs to rot, its clearing to be reclaimed by the forest. No marker would remain. They left at first light, loading the canoes, pushing off into water so cold it felt like burning. The camp vanished behind a bend, swallowed by distance. The current, swollen with meltwater, carried them swiftly. Jean-Baptiste watched the blurring shoreline and felt a detachment so complete, he might have been a ghost observing another man's life. Jean-Baptiste never saw that particular valley again, though he spent 11 more winters in similar camps. They blurred together into a single, extended memory of cold, canvas, and waiting. He learned rivers and routes, which camps were lucky and which were cursed. He became, in time, like merit weathered, quiet, capable of endurance that looked like indifference. And new men arrived. He watched them with the same assessing gaze he had once received, noting who would adapt and who would break. Some reminded him of his younger self, all nervous energy and false confidence. Others arrived already hardened, knowing this was just another flavor of hardship to be swallowed. He rarely thought of that first winter of Philippi, of the specific terrors of those early nights. Orat had been right. The details frightened. Totally. Only the knowledge, of survival remained. His face merged with others who had died in other camps, in other winters. Death became ordinary, an occupational hazard. Years later, having left the trade for a settled life in a town whose name he'd once vowed never to forget, a young clerk asked him what the winters had been like. The clerk was town-born. His idea of hardship a week with a short wood pile. He was politely curious. Jean-Baptiste searched for words, found only the obvious. Cold, he said finally. They recalled. It was inadequate, but it was all he had to give. The true answer would have required explaining the texture of darkness in a camp, the weight of shared silence, the way time distended, the intimacy of communal misery. It would have meant saying survival was not heroic but tedious. That courage was less about bravery than about the simple, dogged refusal to stop breathing. That the winters did not build character so much as they sanded him, and down to his essential, stubborn core. The clerk would have nodded politely, uncomrefined. Understanding required the experience, the sensation of truly believing the sun might not rise for you. So Jean-Baptiste said no more, and the clerk moved on satisfied. Jean-Baptiste bore no resentment. They inhabited different planets. On the clerk's planet, cold was a nuisance, darkness ended with a lamp's glow, comfort could be bought. The winters receded in memory, but his body remembered what his mind forgot. His hands ached in damp weather. His sleep was forever light fractured. He still woke sometimes in the deep night, listening for sounds he could no longer name. Even in his own bed, with a reliable stove and solid walls, he sometimes woke reaching for wood to feed a phantom fire. The motion was a ghost in his muscles. These were the winter's permanent tattoos. Not dramatic, just quiet alterations to his being. He could never sit with his back to a door. He needed to catalog exits in any room. Excessive warmth made him uneasy. People attributed these quirks to age. In his final years, when memory itself grew soft at the edges, he dreamed of the camps, not specific places, but the feeling of them, the waiting, the cold, the darkness that was a presence, not an absence. The dreams were not nightmares. They were visitations. He would wake not in fear, but with a strange, aching nostalgia, as if for something he had never loved. Perhaps he missed the clarity. Life in the town was a tangle of obligations, debts, complexities. The winter camps had offered a brutal simplicity endure until morning. That was all. Jean-Baptiste Larocque, he died in 1847, in a bed in a room where a fire never went out, surrounded by people for whom true cold was a fairy tale. His last thoughts are not recorded. Those at his bedside spoke of half-an-hour reunion. He gave no sign he heard. His headstone reads only Jean-Baptiste Larocque, 1770–1847. No mention of the winters, the camps, the furs, the nights. To a passerby, he is just a name, a set of dates. The camps themselves have long since returned to the forest. Their log bones are mulch. Their fire pits are filled with leaf litter. Archaeologists may someday brush the soil from a hearth sign, write papers on the fruit rate economy, but they will never recover the experience, the waiting, the listening, the particular quality of darkness before electricity. And yet, something persists, not in stone or record, but in the simple, undeniable fact that it happened. Men sat in the cold. They fed fires. They listened to the ice groan. They waited for a dawn that was never guaranteed. Their survival changed no historical currents, built no monuments. But it happened. They endured because the alternative was to stop, and they were not yet ready to stop. The measure of a life, Jean-Baptiste might have thought, is not in what you build, but in what you outlast. He had outlasted winters that would have claimed softer men. The rhythm of those nights echoes forward, a faint vibration in the history of human discomfort. We have mostly forgotten. We live in sealed, heated boxes, and plain of minor drafts. We rarely wonder if we will see the morning. The distance between our lives and Jean-Baptiste's is not just years. It is a chasm of fundamental experience. Men like him, unremarkable, their names in no ledger of greatness, they simply worked, and endured and eventually died. They were there. They tended the fires. They waited. They formed the invisible suffering foundation upon which later comforts were built, though the connection is rarely drawn. The furs they cut warmed people in distant parlors who never wondered at the cost. That is all. And somehow it is everything. The winters continue, of course, but we meet them through double-minus-paned glass. Somewhere, perhaps, a version of the story still plays out. Different actors, different stage, same essential drama of fragile warmth against persistent dark. Jean-Baptist's story ends, as all stories must, in silence. But for a moment, held in these words, the camp flickers back to life. The fire snaps, the cold presses in, and a man sits, feeding the flames, listening, counting the heartbeats until dawn. Historical records of these frontier winters are curiously silent on the subject of darkness itself. Arnold's detailed practicalities pelt stallied, weather noted, supplies counted, but the night, as an experience, goes largely unremarked. This omission is telling. It suggests something too fundamental to write down or too intimate. The physical remains, however, speak a different language. Excavated campsites from Quebec to the Oregon Territory show patterns that speak of deep-seated anxiety. Shelters clustered defensively, backs to cliffs or thickets, openings facing inward toward common fire pits sacrificing ventilation for a sense of security. Fire pits are found layered, one atop another in the same spot, season after season. Stones are fire shattered from repeated use. The ground around them is worn into hollows by the same bodies sitting in the same places, night after endless night. This ritualistic consistency across vast distances implies a shared, unspoken culture of nocturnal vigilance. The written fragments we have are tantalizingly brief. 8 Irie note from 1800 to Lave Eltournay set nude the watch rotated tonight. Another from 1819, mentioning the importance of keeping the fire continuous. A letter from 1830 describes a man who would not sleep with his back to the door. No explanation is given. It was simply known. You kept the fire. You kept the watch. You slept facing the threat. Knowledge passed by demonstration, not discussion. But what was the threat? Predators? Rival trappers? The records show few actual attacks. The defensive postures seem designed more for the fear of the unknown that the absolute darkness made tangible. Indigenous nations had complex protocols for darkness, born of deep ecological knowledge. The traders, unmoored from their own cultural contexts, borrowed pieces of this wisdom without the framework. They learned that certain practices helped, but not always why. And over decades, practical knowledge ossified into tradition. You kept the fire burning not because of wolves, but because not keeping it felt wrong. By the 1840s, a newcomer inherited a set of behaviors whose original purposes were fogged by time. He learned to sleep with his knife at hand, to wake at certain intervals, to interpret night sounds through a filter of inherited caution. Tools found in excavations tell the same story: knives, axes, rifles placed within the sleeping space itself, positioned for instant use despite the discomfort. It prepared for a danger that seldom materialized. The gap between the preparation and the actual incidence of attack is the clue. The real enemy was not outside, but within. It was uncertainty. The utter, consuming dark beyond the fire's ring created a world where every sound was ambiguous, every shadow potentially lethal. Without artificial light, darkness was not an absence, it was a substance. A man 20 feet away vanished. Wind and pines could mimic speech. Settling snow could sound like a footfall. In such conditions, belief and perception bled together. Men developed a chronic, low-grade vigilance, a background hum of alertness that never fully shut off. Sleep, when it came, was shallow and fragmented, as evidenced by the disturbed, uneven compaction of earth in sleeping areas. The alcohol was a poor and perilous remedy. It impaired the very faculties survival depended on. Stories circulated of men who drank themselves into a fatal stupefy from their own shelter. The primary coping mechanism was grim acceptance. Endurance. You accepted the poor sleep. The constant chill, the watchfulness as the tax on being alive. The mystery, then, is not what they feared, but why their fear left so few words. Perhaps the experience was too ordinary to merit comment, like breathing, or perhaps it was too private. The night was a communal ordeal experienced in profound isolation. Each man lay with his own ghosts, his own regrets, his own calculations of mortality. How do you record the feel of darkness? The weight of silence, the texture of a fear that has no specific object. These are sensations, not facts, and journals were for facts. So the nights passed largely unrecorded. We are left with the archaeology of anxiety, the clustered shelters, the worn hearths, the carefully placed tools. For we can reconstruct the what, but not the how it felt. Perhaps that inaccessibility is the point. The experience of true, unmitigated winter darkness on the frontier may be fundamentally untransitable across the gulf of technological and sensory history. We have lights that banish it, heat that nullifies it. The past is a different sensory reality. What we can know is that it mattered. That darkness was a force to be reckoned with, a presence that shaped behavior, belief, and culture. That men developed a sophisticated, silent culture to manage it, and that this culture, born of fear and necessity, left its faint imprint on the frontier character long after the camps were gone. And it lingers in old building orientations and certain persistent habits of caution. The fear diluted over generations into preference, then into vague habits, then into nothing. Yet it was once a vital, visceral thing. The camps stand as markers of a time when humans lived in a more immediate, more fraught relationship with the dark, when the night was not a backdrop, but an active participant in the drama of survival. The struggle was not evenly distributed. While trappers shivered in canvas, others endured the same winter from behind substantial walls. Trading posts and forts represented a different calculus. Here, architecture mediated the threat. Log walls, proper roofs, multiple rooms. Factor the company agent in charge occupied quarters that would seem palatial to a camped dweller, a private room, a raised bed, perhaps a small stove. His privilege was not luxury, but the simple advantage of planning and capital. He could read or write correspondence by candlelight, extending his productive day. His mind could dwell on future quarters, inventory, strategy, a luxury of foresight denied to the man focused only on the next log for the fire. Candlelight itself was a form of wealth, fat or wax allocated for comfort rather than pure survival. And dark fell. The post did not surrender. Guards were posted on scheduled, formal rotations. Their vigilance was bounded, finite. They knew their watch would end in 4 hours. That relief would come. This psychological difference, bounded duty versus endless watchfulness, was profound. The factor could sleep, truly sleep, because the responsibility for vigilance had been delegated to a system. This delegation was the essence of institutional safety. The quality of sleep became a marker of social position. Deep, sustained rest was a resource as valuable as flour or powder. Military forts took systematization further. Rigid hierarchies, explicit protocols, standing orders born of accumulated, codified experience. Medical care, however rudimentary, altered the fundamental equation of risk. Injury or illness shifted from a probable death sentence to a treatable condition. An officer retiring in a fort like William or Union was insulated by layers, walls, guards, procedures, the presence of a garrison. His experience of the same winter night was alien to the trappers, yet they coexisted, sometimes a mere day's journey apart. The gulf between them was not measured in miles, but in degrees of vulnerability. Food security alone created a chasm. The post had calculated stores, regular meals, and lived on uncertainty. Hunger is not just physical, it is a cognitive tax, a constant, gnawing anxiety that poisons rest and sharpens fear. The well-fed man slept through that particular dread. Yet even the factor's comfort was conditional. His authority, his safety, depended on the compliance of the men below him, on supply lines holding, on systems not failing. To let us reveal this underlying anxiety, worry over morale, over discipline, over mutiny. His better sleep came with the price of leadership, the vigilance required to maintain the social order that granted that sleep. The hierarchies were made spatial, and thus undeniable. The factor's closed door, the God-sheltered post, the common room for hired men, the exposed, marginal spaces allotted to indigenous traders or families. Power was written in the allocation of warmth and walls. Indigenous women connected to traders occupied a perilous middle ground. Their safety was often contingent on a relationship, revocable at any time. Their nights were shaped by a precariances that added its own layer of watchfulness. Children of mixed heritage inherited this ambiguous position, never fully inside or outside the walls. As winter deepened, the disparity widened. By February, the camp dweller was surviving on reserves of fat and willpower, deteriorating. The post-resident was perhaps leaner, but fundamentally intact. Yet both were imprisoned by the season. Both waited for the thaw. Winter imposed a strange democracy of confinement. The difference was in the distance from the edge of catastrophe. The factor had space between his position and disaster. The trapper in his tent had almost none. Some displaced indigenous peoples, the utterly destitute, were already over that edge, surviving in ways that left little trace in the company ledgers. And archaeology reveals this stratification. The factor's quarters yield finer pottery, evidence of varied diet, personal items hinting at leisure. The common quarters yield simpler artifacts, a testament to austerity. These material differences accumulated, night by night, until spring revealed who had endured and who had merely survived. Bodies told the final story. Some emerged capable of another season. Others emerged broken, aged, diminished. The system appeared meritocratic. Those who thrived were promoted to greater safety, which helped them thrive further. Those who struggled remained in exposure, which made advancement harder. Success bred success, hardship compounded. Occasionally, a man crossed over. A promoted trapper discovered comfort was structural, not personal. A demoted factor learned the hard way that survival was harder without the system's buffer. These revelations were rarely spoken aloud. To acknowledge that privilege was structural would undermine the entire fiction of the fur trade's social order. Though the fiction was maintained, comfort was earned by merit. Finn participated in this collective story, even while privately knowing its falsehood. As spring came, the stark differences of winter blurred in the shared sunlight of renewed activity. Oh, privately the memories and the bodily damage remained. The trapper carried the winter in his bones, the factor in his assumptions of safety. These bodily memories shaped all their interactions, invisible but potent, and so the cycle prepared to renew itself. Each person approached the next winter with expectations set by their position. The factor anticipated manageable comfort. The trapper anticipated grinding difficulty. Both were usually correct. The system perpetuated itself with a terrible efficiency. Each winter night reinforced the patterns that would define the next. Change came only through crisis, fire, mutiny, an unusually vicious winter. These possibilities haunted the comfortable as well as the exposed. Different fears, same source. The night, in the end, treated everyone with the same cold indifference. Humanity had simply arranged itself to experience that indifference in wildly different ways. The stars shone the same on all, but their meaning changed depending on whether you saw them through a frozen pane of glass, over the sights of a musket on watch, or through a gap in a threadbare canvas roof, praying for dawn. The wind blew with the same velocity, that it met a log wall, or a sheet of canvas, or the naked skin of a man's face. So each person faced the darkness according to their station. Some from behind thick timber, with sentries pacing. Some from within a fragile shell of cloth, with only their own ears for sentries. The night was the same. The experience of it, a world apart. The nights we have wandered through belong to a vanished world. The camps are dust. The men are names on forgotten stoves. But an echo persists in the effort to imagine that particular shade of dark, that particular quality of cold. We have followed them into the granular reality of camp life. through one man's initiation, into the silent, fearful culture they built around darkness, and seen how hierarchies reshaped its fundamental experience. These were not tales of hydroma. They were stories of accretion, of thousands, of unremarkable nights, endured by unremarkable men. This patience was born of a complete lack of choice. The night stacked into winters, the winters into lights, the lights into a historical moment that closed when the frontier itself closed. What remains is this ghost, this attempt to rebuild a feeling from fragments. We can never fully reclaim the sensation of believing the dark might win, though we can acknowledge that for them, it was a real possibility. You, listening now in your warmth, under electric light, inhabit a reality they would have considered sorcery. The flip of a switch banishes the dark. A dial summons heat from nothing. You can sleep without listening. Your night and their share the same astronomical basis the planets turn away from the sun. That the human experience of that turn has been utterly transformed. We have pushed the dark back, made it optional, but we have not eradicated it. It waits in power outages and wilderness in the inherited atavistic prickle at the back of the neck. When the lights go out unexpectedly, we still lock doors. We still prefer light. These are the faint, genetic memories of that older vigilance. Perhaps it is right that we remember, however dimly. Our comfort is an achievement, a fortress built on centuries of toil and innovation. They had no such fortress. They had fire, cloth, and the stubborn persistence of the human organism. And somehow it was enough, just enough to carry them stumbling into the gray light of another dawn. We honor them not by romanticizing their hardship, but by looking at it clearly, by understanding that their nights were harder than ours can ever be, that they endured what we have been spared. Their survival was not epic. It was granular, tedious, magnificent in its mundane persistence. They sat. He fed the flames. They waited. They did this because it was that or die, and because morning, however distant, always seemed a thing worth waiting for, and morning always came. Eventually, the dark always lifted. The cold remained, but the night ended, and that ending was reason enough to face the next one. We, in our soft beds, can feel the distance between our reality and theirs. We can rest easy, knowing our vigil is optional, our warmth assured. Let their long struggle settle into the back of your mind as you drift toward sleep. Let the rhythm of their watching, their waiting, their enduring become a dark lullaby, a reminder that your safety is a historical novelty. Their fire is ash, their canvas is earth, their names are weather-worn stone. But their nights persist in memory, in this act of imagination, in the quiet acknowledgement that such nights once were, and that they mattered. They shaped the contours of the world that cradles you now. So rest in your warmth, in your safety, in your freedom from that ancient, necessary watchfulness. Let the vast distance between your experience and theirs be a source of quiet gratitude, not anxiety. The nights are kinder now. Let that kindness carry you down into sleep, into the gentle, unthreatening dark that will lift, all on its own, when morning comes. For now, there is only night, soft, secure, yours to sleep through, undisturbed. Release the frontier, release the cold, release the watch. Those nights are done. This night is peace. Rest now, rest. Imagine the moment when the encroaching dusk felt not like a blanket of peace, but the lowering of a perk talus. When the sun's final slip behind the tree line triggered, not the relief of rest, but the tightening of every muscle, the beginning of a slow, cold siege. This was the law of the land in the frozen heart of the early American frontier. And the great, silent cathedrals of pined along the locked, white arteries of the rivers, human life persisted in tiny, temporary clots. Winter camps. They achieved a stillness that was not serenity but a held breath. The darkness that followed was long, profound and absolute. To live through it was a negotiation conducted with failing fire, flimsy walls, and the fraying thread of human patience. Before we step into that particular chill, a small invitation. If these journeys into history's hushed and forgotten hours speak to you, consider joining us. A like, a subscription to Epic, boring history. These are the signals in the dark that tell us you're out there listening. Leave a word in the comments. Tell us your corner of the world, the hour on your clock, whether you're surrendering to sleep or steeling yourself for day. Now settle in. Let the light grow soft around you. Allow the faint, constant murmur of your own safe world, the sigh of a vent, the whisper of traffic to form the baseline. Let us begin. The light doesn't fade so much as it is extinguished, pulled from the world with a swiftness that feels personal, even when you are expecting it. For the past hour you have been engaged in a quiet, desperate harvest. Your movements are urgent, but controlled to rushes to sweat, and sweat in this cold is a form of slow suicide. The stack of wood beside the lean -2 is a monument to inadequacy. You add another armful anyway, a gesture of defiance against the coming night, knowing full well the pile will look pathetic and insufficient in the grim, gray light of dawn. Others are specters in the half-light, performing the same rituals. Test the tension of lines, brush accumulated snow from the sagging canvas roof, pat the walls as if reassuring a nervous animal. Speech is rare in this transitional hour. The silence is not hostile, it is efficient, a conservation of precious inner resources. Words are calories that could be spent on shivering. Your gaze sweeps automatically to the tree line, not because you hope to see anything, but because not looking would feel like negligence. The trees are losing their individuality, merging into a solid black rampart against the lessered arc of the sky. The forest isn't sleeping, it is receding, pulling its essence back into the earth, leaving only a skeleton of ice and shadow. You have become fluent in the grammar of winter twilight. There is a specific, palpable weight to the dimmings that tells you how many minutes of useful vision remain. Today, that weight descended early, pressed down by the low, slate-colored clouds that have haunted the sky since noon. This knowledge isn't conscious, it's physiological, etched into your nerves by repetition. The sky is a sundial read with your skin. Inside the shelter, the air is a thick, palpable broth. Elang of wood smoke, the wet wool stink of never dry clothing, and the close, animal scent of confined humanity. The fire pit is a wound in the frozen ground, its rim a circle of stones that have drunk deep of sooted flame. They are veterans of this war. Their surfaces are glossy, cracked black. Someone has arrayed damp mittens and socks on a stick near the heat, and their steaming adds a note of wet sheep and decay to the air. It is not a pleasant smell, but it is an honest one, the signature odor of shared fate. The stones occasionally protest their duty with a sharp, stony crack, splitting from the relentless thermal shock. Each fracture is a memento mori, a reminder that even the earth has its breaking point. You lower yourself onto your designated plot. Beneath the thin, brittle mat of last autumn's pine boughs and a blanket that transparency has rendered more conceptual than practical, the ground is adamantine. The cold doesn't creep, it announces itself. A solid, aching pressure against hip, shoulder blade, thigh. You shift, a futile attempt to outmaneuver the numbness you know is coming. The boughs beneath were once a promise of comfort, green and springy. Now they are a brown, compressed crust, offering little more insulation than a scattering of dead leaves. You remember, with a sudden, painful clarity, the first night, how this same arrangement felt like luxury. How the new canvas smell of the shelter whispered of adventure, not ordeal. That particular delusion lasted about 17-2 hours, until the deep night cold seeped and untaught you the truth. The fire converses in pops and sighs. It is a sound you have learned to mistrust, for its peaks of a precious commodity being devoured. You no longer tell time by the sun or stars, but by the life cycle of a flame. You are an intimate of its metabolism, the height of its yellow tongues, the deep, pulsating glow of its coals, the rate at which a stout log is transformed into feathery ash. These are your hours, your minutes. Tonight will likely require for such interventions. Each is a minor crisis, the shock of uncoiling your body, the dagger thrust of cold air as the shelter flap is lifted, the awkward, painful fumble with frozen wood. You have learned to tense your entire body beforehand, a pathetic human attempt to create a rampart against the invading chill. The logistics of combustion are second nature now. You can judge a piece of wood by its heft and texture, predicting whether it will blaze with a short, dramatic fervor or burn with a slow, dogged loyalty. Your fingers, even nestled in the relative warmth of your lap, have developed their own grim autonomy. They ache with a deep, bony throb, the kind of pain that feels less like an injury and more like a permanent condition. You flex them slowly, watching the joints move like poorly greased hinges on a rusted gate. By morning, they will be clumsy alien things, and you will waste the first precious hour of light trying to coax life back into them. The stiffness is a creeping tide. It begins in the very tips, in the tiny, complex knuckles that allow for fine motion. It advances, claiming wrist elbows, until your entire arm feels like a piece of utilitarian machinery, not a part of you. You have tried every folk remedy: friction, the warm fog of your own breath, tucking them into the comparative heat of your armpits. Each grants a brief, miserly parole. The others arrange themselves around the fire's meager democracy. Each man occupies a sovereign territory of frozen earth. There is an unspoken, immutable ledger governing these positions. Its accounts kept in tenure, endurance, and perceived toughness. You hold a middle seat, close enough for the fire to paint your face in shifting chiarosy, far enough that your spine remains a ridge of perpetual ice, a country the warmth never visits. It is always the back that remembers the winter. The man to your left arrived a full 2 weeks before you. This antiquity of tenure buys him perhaps 8 inches of superior real estate. He does not mention it, you do not dispute it. The social order here is one of the few stable architectures. The newest arrival, more boy than man, holds the post by the entrance, where the wind conducts its most persistent experiments. He took the position without a word, his eyes already aged with the knowledge that comfort is not a right, but a dividend paid in blood and labor. And now, true darkness completes its conquest. The world beyond the taut skin of canvas ceases to exist. It is replaced by a kingdom of sound. The forest talks in its sleep. Trees, gripped in the cold's vise, release sharp, percussive cracks, distant gunshots in a silent war. Out on the river, the ice sheet groans, a deep visceral bass note of monumental pressure and strain. These are the known noises, the ambient soundtrack of the season. You have trained yourself to listen through them. It is the silences between them that hold the true tension, the moments when everything stills and the quiet itself becomes a presence, listening back. The river is a felt entity to the east, invisible but audible. Its voice is different from the tree's ale hour, more resonant register, felt in the chest as much as heard. In daylight, you've walked its frozen plain, seen the great buckled ridges and, more dangerously, the dark, liquid veins where the current still runs strong beneath. The ice is a text of warnings, and everyone here is illiterate at their peril. A cough airs the close, smoky air. Wet, rattling, intimately familiar. The same cough from yesterday and the day before. It has deepened, but not yet crossed the invisible line from chronic nuisance to acute crisis. Crisis would demand action, and there is no meaningful action to take. There are no elixirs, no steam tents, no doctors, only the slow, passive strategy of waiting, and the frail hope that a body's own defenses will hold until the world thaws. The coffer is young, or was. A beard of neglect and the weathering of the elements make age a guess. His eyes have that telltale, glassy brightness that often marches ahead of a fever, yet he still rises for his shift at the woodpile, still performs his duties. Here, illness has a brutal taxonomy: what you can work through, and what you cannot. There is no third category for recovery. No gentle convalescence. You endure, or you end. The fire's light wanes, dimming by a perceptible degree. A-shaped stir RS in the gloom, breath plumbing in the orange light like a soul escaping. He adds not one, but 2 chunks of wood to the glowing nest. An act of generosity, or perhaps of fear. More fuel now means less later, a debt against tomorrow's comfort. But later is a theoretical country. Now is the only sovereign state. You have made the same desperate calculus on other nights, trading future security for present solace. The choice always feels momentous, weighted with consequence. Though you know in the long ledger of winter, It barely registers. The wood supply is a constant. Low minus grade anxiety. Trees still stand within a punishing day's labor. Branches can still be harvested. The work is Herculean, but it remains within the realm of possibility. For now, you let your eyelids fall, not for sleep, but to grant your vision a respite from the hypnotic decay of the flame. But the darkness behind your eyes amplifies every other sense. The damp chill of your clothes becomes a clammy embrace. The stiff cable of your neck screams for attention. The layered smells of smoke, mold, and unwashed humanity grow more pungent, more oppressive. You open them again. Sleep will claim you eventually, not as a welcome guest, but as a mugger who overpowers your exhaustion. Behind your closed lids, the after-image of the flame dances, a phantom sun of orange and gold. These imagined flames are, perversely, warmer than the real ones. Her neck hosts a permanent, dull rebellion, a knot of tension that radiates from the base of your skull down, between your shoulder blades. A topography of ache. You cannot recall the last time your head found a neutral posture, a position that wasn't a negotiation with pain. Conversation around the fire is a sparse, utilitarian thing. A comment about the morning's weather, a guess about snow, a mention of a trapped spring that needs fixing. No one gives voice to the heavier questions that saturate the smoky air. How many more nights? How much deeper can the cold go? Do the flower hold, or the salt? These questions have no answers that bring comfort, so they are swallowed, left to curdle in the gut. Instead, someone mutters that the cloud-minus cover looks thinner to the west, and another offers a grunt of ambivalent agreement. The silence returns, somehow thicker for having been briefly pierced. With a prophecy here is a bastard science, half observation, half desperate prayer. You've all learned to read the sky's scant clues, the shape of clouds, the direction of the wind's bite, the flight of the last stubborn ravens. But winter is a capricious deity, delighting in the folly of mortal predictions. Tomorrow's weather dictates tomorrow's labor, which in turn dictates the precise flavor of tomorrow night's misery. Every element is shackled to the next in a long, unforgiving chain of cause and effect. You hitch the blanket higher, a symbolic gesture. It offers negligible warmth, but the motion is a tiny act of defiance, a pantomime of control. Smoke, whimsical as ever, shifts direction and drifts into your face. You turn away, but your eyes sting in water regardless, adding their own saline dampness to the general clam mind's of your existence. The blanket in your hand is a pathetic sovereign, scarce, greasy wool, worn to a ghostly web in places. You have mapped its geography of holes by heart, can't trace their borders with a numb fingertip. It was issued to you, one item in a stack of identical, threadbare relics, yet you are fiercely, irrationally possessive of it. In this place of shared everything, it is yours alone. A tiny ragged kingdom. Nothing ever achieves a state of true dryness. Everything exists in a perpetual, damp twilight, oscillating slowly between wet and frozen, never resting long at either pole. Your stomach tightens, a hollow fist. Hunger has become a constant, so familiar it often fades into the background noise of discomfort. The evening meal was a thin, grudging gruel, leathery strips of dried meat and whatever tough, bitter roots could be wrestled from the iron ground. Enough to silence the stomach's most vocal protests, but never enough to whisper full. The meat requires an eternity of chewing, a tasteless, salty exercise. The roots are worse, needing prolonged boiling to become merely edible, never pleasant. Someone somewhere once claimed they held vitamins. You have seen no evidence of this, except for the observable fact that men who eat them do not immediately perish. Satisfaction is not an expectation here. Endurance is the only currency. One meager meal leading inexorably to the next. One endless night yielding, eventually, to a gray, laborious dawn. Outside, the wind discovers a new vigor. You hear it first in the high branches, a rushing sigh, before it begins its meticulous exploration of the shelter's flaws. Cold air, sharper than a skinning knife, finds every imperfect seam, every loosely tied cord, every threadbare patch in the canvas. You retreat into your coat, pulling your arms inside the shell, tucking your hands against the faint, biological warmth of your own ribs. It helps, marginally, if you can achieve absolute stillness. The coat is a carapace of stiffened canvas, its original color buried beneath a geology of dirt, pine pitch, and wood smoke. Inside this portable cave, your hands find a faint echo of your body's fading furnace. You have learned to keep them there, prisoners of your own heat, releasing them only for the most critical of tasks. Movement is expenditure. It means exposing flesh to the air, means sacrificing the precious, trapped warmth. So you cultivate the art of stillness. You become a statue breathing shallowly, your universe contracted to the hypnotic circle of firelight. Time in this relentless repetition sheds all meaning. You might have been sitting here for 20 minutes or for 2 hours. There is no internal chronometer left that you trust. Your sense of duration has been stretched and compressed by monotony and pain. What feels like an eternity might be a brief interval, a short, stolen doze might encompass half the night. The others mark the passage of time in their own somatic languages. A hip shifted in the dirt. A throat cleared. The soft, definitive thump of another log on the fire. These are the true ticks of a night's quack. The darkness will end when it chooses. Knowing the hour will not hasten its departure. The man beside you moves, adjusting his position in the dirt. Where his body had been a slight, living buffer against the cold, a new draft now rushes in to claim the space. He is engaged in the same hopeless quest for a bearable posture. You do not look at him. To meet his eyes would be to acknowledge the shared, degrading misery. Paradoxically, the physical closeness here breeds a deeper isolation. You are near enough to feel the heat radiating from another man's skin, yet utterly, profoundly alone inside the confines of your own skull. You know the intimate sounds of the men around you, the cadence of their breathing, the particular timbre of a snore better than you know a single one of their hopes or fears. By day, you are a crew, a unit of coordinated labor. By night, you're a collection of solitary sentinels, coincidentally sharing the same frozen foxhole. The fire pops, a sharp, angry report. A miniature constellation of sparks arcs upward toward the roof. You watch them rise, each a tiny, brilliant sun for a fraction of a second, only to die, extinguished before they can kiss the canvas. It is a perfect, devastating metaphor for the fragility of it all. The fire, the shelter, your own stubborn, or to persist all are interdependent, a woven basket holding your lives. A single strand failing could unravel the whole. The roof canvas bears the pockmarks of previous such eruptions, small dark stars burned into the fabric. No one has patched them. The effort required is a currency better spent on more immediate needs. Your mind, treacherous, conjures the full sequence, the canvas catching, the sudden, terrifying flower of flame, the panic, the scramble into the naked, killing cold. The thought is ice water in your veins. You banish it, focusing with fierce intensity on the present, where the fire still burns obediently within its stone ring, where no disaster is currently unfolding. You have heard the stories, of course, told in flat, uninflected voices over other cook fires in other seasons. Tales of shelters collapsing under a sudden, wet load of snow. Of fires that guttered and died in the deepest, blackest hour. Men who simply did not wake up when morning came. These narratives are delivered not as campfire ghost stories, but as technical briefings. Data points. The man who froze had, in his delirium, removed his boots. Lesson: keep your boots on, always. The roof that fell had not been cleared after the last storm. Lesson: clear the snow, no matter how tired you are. Fear is an inefficient emotion, a luxury. Caution is a tool, a discipline. You have learned it, through weary necessity, to walk the narrow line between them. Your legs stage their own protest now, muscles cramping from cold and prolonged immobility. You flex your feet inside your stiff boots, feeling the grind in your ankles, the disturbing void of sensation in your toes. Come morning, those boots will be frozen sculptures, miniature caves of ice, and you will have to fight them onto your feet, a daily, humiliating battle. It is a minor indignity in a life composed of them. The boots are crack leather, race-old with puckered, inelegant patches of rawhide. They fit where they touch, grotesquely loose in some places, agonizingly tight in others. They're what you have. Inside them, your feet exist in a permanent, damp twilight. The leather cannot breathe, sweat has nowhere to go. You have made a bitter peace with the inevitability of blisters, of chilblains, praying only that they do not progress to the point of crippling you. Walking is not a luxury. Here, it is the very mechanism of survival. Across the fire, a man has his eyes closed, but you doubt he sleeps. His breathing is too shallow to control. The line of his jaw is taut, a ridge of muscle working even in his pretended rest. Now when he receives true sleep, the cold is an insomniac jailer. What passes for sleep is a shallow, twitching semi-minus consciousness, a temporary, uneasy truce between exhaustion and discomfort. Real sleep requires a surrender the body will not allow in this place. You have dreamed here, fractured, senseless visions that splash shards of memory, a warm hearth, a familiar voice with the gritty, cold reality of your surroundings. These dreams are always shattered by some physical revolt, a easing calf muscle, a piercing chill that finds its way through your layers, the urgent, bladder-minus deep pressure that forces you back to the wretched, waking world. They are less escapes than they are cruel parodies of escape. You strain your ears, trying to parse the wind's intent. Is it gathering strength, coiling for a more sustained assault? Or is it fating losing interest? From inside this fabricant wood-minus smoke filter, it is impossible to be sure. The wind is a capricious master here. It dictates the fire's temperament, discovers new vulnerabilities in your defenses, sets the misery index for the hours to come. But it is utterly beyond your control. So, listening becomes another form of prayer, or of pointless vigilance. You have learned, through brutal experience, that a north wind carries the deepest, most sincere cold straight from the pole. A west wind often brings snow and its baggage, great silent battalions of it. This knowledge was not taught, it was almost deep through your skin, written in the aches of your joints. Tonight, the wind seems indecisive, circling, coming from no fixed quarter. This unsettled behavior is often the harbinger of a storm. Either the storm arrives this very night, or tomorrow, or decides to spare you entirely, is a secret the wind keeps to itself. Someone impatient, or simply colder than the rest adds wood before the fire has properly asked for it. The flames leap in gratitude, throwing a new, sharper blow of shadows against the shelter walls. The dancing silhouettes create a brief, beautiful illusion of life and movement. For a single fleeting heartbeat, the shelter feels less like a desperate holding cell and more like a place where people might actually live. The illusion is tissue-minus thin and quickly torn. You watch the fresh bark curl and blacken, watch the first eager, orange tongues of flame lick along the wood's grain. There is a primal, hypnotic solace in watching fire consume. It is a process so fundamental it requires no thought, only witness. You become aware suddenly of your own breathing, of how the cold air rasps slightly in your throat, a tiny burn with each inhalation. You experiment, trying to breathe through the wool of your blanket to warm the air before it hits your lungs. It feels suffocating, like trying to inhale through a wet sock. You stop. It is the relentless accumulation that wears you down. No single discomfort is unbearable, but the chorus of them, the stiff fingers, the aching back, the chapped and splitting lips, the maddening itch on your scalp beneath your hat, the hollow, clutching fist of your stomach creates a collective weight that presses you into the frozen ground. Your lips are fissured and draw at the cornice. You have disciplined yourself not to lick them, it only makes the cracks burn and bleed anew. But the instinct persists, a tiny, recurring madness. Your scalp itches fiercely, an infuriating sensation you cannot properly scratch through layers of matted hair and greasy wool. These minuscule torments become towering obsessions in the long, empty hours. Thoughts circle like vultures because there is no other prey for the mind. You think of home, or what used to be home, but the memories are flat, to minus dimensional, like faded illustrations in a book you read long ago in another life. You can see the faces, but you cannot hear the laughter. You can recall events, but not the emotions that gave them color and weight. This disconnect is more frightening than the cold when you allow yourself to dwell on it, so you do not dwell. You focus on the immediate, the tangible, the size of the fire, the remaining wood in the pile, the specific, deepening quality of the darkness, the slow, granular passage of time, measured in the crackle of a log and the next man's cough. The fire dims again. This time, a collective inertia holds everyone in place. Perhaps each man is locked in a silent hope that the responsibility will fall to another. Perhaps each is simply too weary, soul minus deep, to make the decision to move. The cold, sensing this hesitation, presses its advantage. It creeps closer, a palpable, malevolent force, a reminder that the warmth is leased, not owned, and the rent comes due with brutal regularity. You wait. Do you watch the flames shrink, retreating into their bed of pulsating coals? How long will this mute standoff last? It is a tiny, nightly rebellion against duty. It always brags, because it must. Letting the fired eye is not an option. It is a death sentence, slow but certain. The flames are ghosts now, mere embers glowing a sullen red, giving little light and less heat. The temperature drop is immediate, a psychic slap. The thin, fragile barrier between bearable and unbearable has been decisively crossed. It falls to you. You rise, a slow, painful uncoiling. Every joint protests. Muscles creak in complaint. You reach for the woodpile, your fingers still clumsy, selecting to pieces by feel and memory alone medium-sized. Dry, solid. You place them with ceremonial care on the glowing heart of the fire. For a moment nothing, and a wisp of smoke, a hesitant flicker, and the flames birth themselves anew, climbing the offered fuel with growing confidence. Warmth, that fickle, essential friend, staggers back into the space. The simple act of standing has left you subtly rearranged, more acutely aware of your body's catalog of complaints. Your knees issue dry, popping reports. Your back feels like a bad plank of old wood. The spot you vacated is already cold, the ground seeming harder, the blanket thinner, as if your brief absence had revoked all prior claims to comfort. No one offers thanks. It was your turn. The rotation is the law, the only social contract that matters here. Settling back into your patch of earth, you cannot find the exact hollow your body had painstakingly worn over the weeks. You must begin the process of making it anew through pressure and time and suffering. The night grinds on, measured in these tiny, repetitive sacraments. The feeding of the fire, the slow, insidious numbing of extremities, the vague, shallow drift between a brick of signals and a shallow, dreamless nothingness. You open your eyes some time later, seconds, minutes, an hour, and nothing has changed. The fire still burns, though lower. The men are still shapeless mounds in the gloom. The cold still holds the shelter in its unrelenting fist. You have no memory of closing your eyes, no sense of duration. Time has flowed around you like a cold river around a stone, utterly indifferent. The fire looks distinctly weaker. Someone else's turn will come soon. This is the rhythm, the metronome of the winter camp night. Not heroic, not dramatic, not eventful, just long. To endure them not through any vaulting romantic courage, but through the utter, complete absence of an alternative. Morning always comes. It is the one promise this landscape keeps, however grudgingly. And when it does, you will rise stiff, cold, soul minus weary, and you will begin again the cycle of labor that earns you nothing more than the right to another night of the same static waiting. The promise of dawn is both a solace and a quiet threat. It means the night will end. It also means you must face another day of struggle in a cold that shows no sign of breaking, of relenting, of ever-ending. The cycle feels infinite, eternal, until the day it is, until the ice on the river groans one final time and splits open, until you pack your meager possessions and leave. Until something inside you, some essential spring, simply snaps. You have given up counting days, marking a calendar. That is an act of faith in a future you can no longer clearly envision, in a tomorrow that feels theoretical. There's only now and the vague, stretched minus out later of a winter that feels like the only season that has ever existed or ever will. For this moment, there is only the fire, the darkness, the cold, and the hours that pass with the imperceptible speed of geology. You close your eyes once more, knowing true, restorative sleep is a myth here, but hoping for the counterfeit version anyway. Hope is a free currency in this economy, and sometimes, against all odds, it pays a small dividend of oblivion. Outside, the wind pivots on some unseen axis, finding a new, undiscovered flaw in your shelter's armor. A fresh, keen draft discovers the exposed skin of your neck. You hitch the blanket higher, a futile gesture. Tuck your chin down to your chest, and settle into the only work that truly remains the work of waiting. The darkness beyond your thin canvas walls is absolute, a black wool stuffed into the eyes of the world. No moon pierces the cloud cover, and stars offer their cold, distant comfort. This profound dark makes your tiny haven feel both achingly, terrifyingly isolated and desperately, vitally necessary. A single, fragile bubble of almost minus warmth in a vast and actively hostile nothingness. You listen to the symphony of survival, the self-fing, ragged breath of the men, the eternal crackle minus snap minus spoof conversation of the fire, the endless, moaning monologue of the wind as it combs through the pines. It is a droning, repetitive music, without melody or crescendo, but in its bleak predictability lies a strange, cold comfort. It is the sound of the world continuing, and you, for now, are still a part of it. Your mind unmoored, drifts to the tasks that will define tomorrow. More wood. Always more wood. Snow to shovel from the roof, again. A broken snowshoe to mend. A trapline to walk. The same silent miles. The list is circular, endless, a treadmill, but there is a grim, cold solace in the routine, even a brutal one. It provides a structure, however painful, to the formless era of the long night. The cough comes again from across the fire. Wetter, deeper. You send a silent, pointless wish into the dense dark that it does not worsen, that the thaw eyes before the illness steps irrevocably from a chronic burden to a mortal crisis. The wishes are thin gruel here. Hope is the last, dwindling supply in your pack. The fire needs attention again. You can see it in the languid droop of the flames, the way the light seems to be retreating into the wood itself. But the watch is not yours yet. So you wait, placing a fragile, desperate trust in the unspoken contract that binds you all, that someone else will stir, will rise, will perform the duty when the need becomes dire. Around you, the others inhabit their own private planets of endurance. They are fighting battles that are intimately, uniquely theirs, yet, in their form, they are identical to your own. You are together, yet profoundly, essentially separate, linked by circumstance, isolated by the solitary, cellular nature of suffering. Another span of time elapses, something like an hour, maybe less, maybe more. Fire is fed. The cold does not abate. Nothing changes, except that all of you are incrementally more tired, more worn down, more used. A little more of your original self sanded away by the relentless grit of this existence. This is life distilled to its bitter, elemental essence. Waiting for light, maintaining the flame, surviving. There is no glory in it. No narrative arc, no climax, no resolution. Only the grinding, granular repetition of necessary acts, performed until you cannot perform them, and then performed anyway. Your eyelids are leaden weights again. This time you do not resist. You let yourself be pulled down into whatever semblance of rest your body can muster, knowing the price will be exacted in full upon waking stiffness, chill, a deeper weariness. You accept the transaction. What choice is there? Fire paints the inside of your eyelids a pulsating blood minus red. The cold wraps around you like a second, heavier, more intimate skin. The night stretches on, utterly indifferent to your discomfort, to your longing, to your very existence. And still you endure, because endurance is the only task left on the ledger, the only verb that still has meaning. Tomorrow will arrive with its own set of demands. You will meet them because the alternative is not an alternative at all. It is simply a full stop. For now, in this suspended moment, there is just this: the endless dark, the fragile shelter, the dying fire that must, against all odds and reason, be kept alive. You pull your threadbare kingdom tighter around your shoulders. Shift your weight one final futile time, seeking a ghost of comfort, and surrender completely to the waiting, which is the truest and hardest and only real work of winter.